Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Varia, and welcome to the presentations for week 4. My topic is number 7, the Marrakesh Treaty to facilitate access to published works for persons who are blind, visually impaired, and/or otherwise print disabled. The treaty was adopted on 27 June 2013. It ended 4 years of intense negotiations on an international treaty which promised to boost access to published works for the visually impaired and print disabled. Coincidentally, 27th of June is also Helen Keller, her birthday. She's a blind and deaf person who's left a great legacy behind. When the treaty was agreed upon, it met with standing ovation by over 600 delegates who gathered in Marrakesh by invitation of the Kingdom of the Government of Morocco. The delegates present in Marrakesh during the treaty signing said that it represents the hope the blind community has given to the international community at large. It is looked at as a victory, a huge achievement, and in terms of diversity of interest from different groups, say publishers, the blind community, authors, it has said to achieve a fair balance between all the different parties. One person who was there at the treaty signing, who stands out for me, is the American singer Stevie Wonder, who is a great man himself. He said that this treaty would definitely make a difference. It is going to make a concrete impact in the way that it would contribute to reducing the book famine, which the visually impaired have suffered for way too long. The first slide we're going to look at is the introduction slide. Basically, I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of an idea about how the treaty came about and what it's about. So basically, of all the materials printed every year, only about 1 to 7% are ever made available for the 285 million plus people around the world who are blind or visually impaired. These people, 90% of these people, are from low income developing countries and really do not have access to much. The treaty was adopted on 27th of June 2013, which is also Helen Keller's birthday, by member states of the World Intellectual Property Organization to address the issues more commonly known as the global book famine. It is the first copyright treaty of any kind to include a clear human rights perspective, as it was conceived in line with the human rights principles outlined in the Declaration of Human Rights and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The second slide to look into is the slide which is known as the entry into force. The Marrakesh Treaty is set to enter into force 3 months after 20 eligible states have deposited their instruments of accession to the World Intellectual Property Organization Director. The treaty is open to any member states of WIPO or the EU or any other intergovernmental organizations as authorized by its Assembly of Contracting Parties. But as of June 2016, 20 countries have finally ratified or acceded to the treaty, and now finally the treaty will come into force. On the 30th of September 2016, the first country to ratify their position according to the treaty was India, and after that, other countries followed, such as Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Chile, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, El Salvador, Ecuador, Israel, Mali, Mexico, Mongolia, Paraguay, Peru, the Republic of Korea, Singapore, the United Arab Emirates, Uruguay, Guatemala, and lastly Canada. And after Canada's amendment and ratification of the treaty, finally, 20 countries have satisfied the conditions of the treaty, and it will come into effect from 30th of September of this year. Moving on, now we're at the next slide. It contains the main elements of the content portion of the treaty. One of the first things I wanted to concentrate on were the definitions. The definitions established in the Marrakesh Treaty are fundamental in understanding its scope and application. They provide clarity on who will be able to enjoy its exceptions and limitations as outlined in the treaty. The beneficiaries, what can be made accessible, which are the works, and which format the works can be adapted to, the accessible format copies. Well, it is very interesting of all the definitions. The treaty provides. I just didn't go into details. I just used beneficiary as an example just to show what is provided in the treaty. Well, basically, in the treaty, a beneficiary is defined as a person who is affected by one or more range of disabilities that interfere with the reading of printed materials, including those who are visually impaired, as well as those who are suffering from a disability which restricts them from holding or manipulating a book. The next thing that I was concentrating on were the obligations as defined by the treaty. Basically, the treaty requires contractual parties to fulfill two main obligations when implementing the treaty at a national level, although it can be done according to their own legal systems as well. The first is to provide for a limitation or an exception to copyright in order for beneficiaries and authorized entities to undertake any changes needed to make a copy of the work in an accessible format for persons with a print disability. The second is to allow the exchange across borders of those accessible copies produced according to the limitations and exceptions provided in the Marrakesh Treaty and in accordance to the operation within of their own laws. The import and export of materials across the border will help avoid the duplication of transcription efforts in different countries and would also allow large collections of accessible books to be shared with those with fewer resources, and again, without having to go for the copyright holder's permission. Next, we're going to look at the treaty's relationship to other treaties. Basically, it has no formal relationship with any other treaties. However, it does one really good thing, which is that it reinforces the need for contracting parties to comply with their international obligations regarding the creation of limitations and exceptions at a national level. And in relation to international instruments, the obligation usually relates to the three-step test that can be found in the Berne Convention, the WIPO Copyright Treaty, and the TRIPS Arrangement. The three-step test provides that limitations and exceptions in national legislation should be confined to one, special cases in the area, two, that do not conflict with the normal exploitation of the work, and lastly, three, that do not unreasonably prejudice the legitimate interests of the right holder. The three-step test is actually quite well known in intellectual property law experts and to a lot of other people, but a lot of advocates look at it as a area of concern, especially they regard it as being a kind of a Trojan horse and is mentioned multiple times. The test is mentioned multiple times in the treaty, and they say it acts as a Trojan horse, which would provide for more extensive commercial availability requirements. However, personally, I would say it is not really a big area of concern. I wouldn't think it would really make a difference or cause any kind of concern except for very, very rare exceptional cases. And I think the chances of that happening are very, very slim. So I would not really worry about this. The Marrakesh Treaty has various benefits and importance. We are going to look at the four most important ones right now. Well, the overall global goal for the Marrakesh Treaty has been a shared one for providing increased access to books, magazines, other printed materials. And the first importance, I would say, is the improving awareness of the challenges faced by the print disabled community. I would say the treaty acts as an instrument that fosters discussion and raises awareness about the need for policies that actually benefit people with disabilities. For example, the implementation of the Marrakesh Treaty could provide access to works for people with other type of disabilities or trigger actions to implement additional provisions of the United Conventions. United Nations conventions regarding people with disability in favor of the wider community of persons with disability. The second thing I'm going to discuss is the greater access to education. There is no doubt that education plays maybe the most crucial role in society, and it has an immeasurable impact on a person's life. And the access to to educational materials in accessible formats is essential to enable people with print disabilities to pursue educational opportunities. At the same time, educational institutions are only able to offer their services to individuals with print disabilities if they too have access to accessible format materials. The Marrakesh Treaty will overall improve the availability of accessible format educational materials so that persons with print disabilities can enjoy equal access to education. The third thing I will talk about is the enhancing of social integration and cultural participation. Here I just want to talk about how having equal access to common sources of knowledge and information is crucial for not only like learning but also for social inclusion and cultural participation. By improving access to both education and leisure materials, the Marrakesh Treaty will facilitate greater inclusiveness and participation by persons with print disabilities in the cultural and social life of their communities. Leisure materials such as books, newspapers, magazines have a clear entertainment and information function in society, as well as having an important role in the expression and dissemination of local culture. It is equally important that people with print disabilities in the community have access to these materials, which afford them to the opportunity to fully participate in cultural developments as consumers or creators. The last point I wanted to mention is the poverty alleviation and increased contributions to the national economy. Well, basically, individuals who are highly dependent on educational attainment by providing access to these learning materials in accessible formats. The implementation of the Marrakesh Treaty can be used as a powerful tool for poverty alleviation, providing persons with print disabilities for professional growth, allowing them to contribute to their local economies and become economically self sufficient. In addition, by increasing the focus on accessible format works and improving certainty about the system for their production and distribution under national copyright laws, the Marrakesh Treaty will strengthen local publishing industries and increase investment in copyright industries, which are key drivers for economic growth and development. The next slide consists of noteworthy provisions of the treaty. There are quite a few, but I just wanted to make it quite short and just to give everybody an idea. Again, I will just talk about one of these. Which is Article 2, subsection A, which states that literary and artistic works in the form of text, notation, or related illustrations, whether published or otherwise made publicly available in any media, are covered. Well, this just means that books, textual works, and sheet music, and other materials will be covered, but films or movies will not be covered. So, this is just an interesting area for me, which just shows what is covered and what isn't. But I will not talk about the other articles I've mentioned. I just wanted to go through them real quick. Articles 5 and 6 state that the treaty permits the cross border exchange of accessible format books and between authorized entities and directly from one authorized entity to individuals in other countries. Another article, which is Article 7, um, Well, basically, this mentions technological protection measures, TPMs, which are basically like a digital padlock that publishers put on digital books for to stop it from being passed or accessed illegally. Fortunately, this padlock is inadvertently blocking legitimate access by print disabled people, like the people who use screen reading text to speech software. Article 7 therefore says it should be legal to circumvent the TMP so that a person with a print disability can get access to these books and only for that purpose. The treaty has different effects, good effects across the world. The widespread ramification and implementation of the treaty will have a huge impact on accessibility for persons with print disabilities. It would promote domestic production of accessible materials in each country, along with providing access to books produced elsewhere. It will be important for those countries that cross national boundaries, like English, Bengali, French, Chinese, Russian, Bengali, etc. And me being from Bangladesh, a huge part of India speaks Bengali, all of the West Bengal. And from my research, I found that Bangladesh is not a signee to the treaty. However, they have been using books from India to provide to people with print disabilities. I hope someday soon they sign up and can be a part of the treaty and provide all the facilities that the other countries are providing for the print disabled. And the last effect I want to mention is that less wealthy countries, like Bangladesh, that have not traditionally had robust services for people with print disabilities, will benefit greatly from this access to extensive collections developed in other wealthier countries. In conclusion, I would just like to say that the treaty was a necessary beginning for the Book of Famine, but however, it remains maybe not sufficient enough. Um, it provides a crucial legal framework for adoption of national copyright exceptions in countries that lack them. It creates an international export import regime for the exchange of accessible books across borders. And I just think more countries need to sign, ratify, and implement its provisions. It's a great chance for them to do so. And lastly, libraries, educational institutions, and governments that need to take advantage of the provisions to deliver accessible books to people with print disabilities for education, employment, and full social inclusion. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Have a good day. Hope you enjoyed.